My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired.
See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. We are here today to help you by answering any questions you may have about building your career. Maybe you desire to become a cloud architect or an enterprise architect or a cloud security architect or a cloud AI architect or just an AI architect or any career you desire. We are here to help you. My name is Michael Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I've been an IT architect now for a little over 25 years. Held every architect role you can think of: cloud architect, network architect, security architect, business architect, enterprise architect, and I love these jobs. But, regardless of the career you want, we can help you get there. People that I've coached or trained over the years are working at any company you can think of: Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, Barclays Bank, NatWest, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, MUFG Bank, any company you can imagine. So I want to help you get to your goals. So bring us your questions so Mark and I can help you. Mark is our Chief Technology Officer. Mark is a CCIE. He's got about a decade of experience. He's an incredible network architect and cloud architect, and he's our Chief Technology Officer. So, Mark, why don't you introduce yourself, talk about any things that we've got going on right now, and then we'll start answering questions because I love helping people.
Yeah, as Mike mentioned, I've been in the IT space for quite some time. Definitely had my own share of experiences. One of them was, and this is one of the reasons why Mike and myself, we love doing these Q&A sessions, and we usually have them on Wednesday, but just to be a little bit flexible with the United States holidays that are coming up this week, we had them on today, on Tuesday. Yeah. But we found out that through our careers, having people that can mentor you, give you good guidelines and structure and roadmaps was not something that was readily available, at least in the environments that Mike and myself found ourselves in. So to be able to do a little bit of something like we are doing today, which is all about you, all of you that are here today, that are sitting in, listening, it's all about you. It's not about us. The only thing about us here is what we can give to you all in regards to some, nuggets of wisdom, some gold nuggets, so to say. And also, we got two additional other things for you. If you take a look up there, there's a little banner. That is our little gift this month to everybody. We do have a limited amount of slots open. I tried to figure out what these slots are. Mike, Chris, and Alonzo refused to tell me. I think that's because of the technical aspects. I like to give details so that there's certain clarity, but it also keeps a little bit of mystery, the fact that we only have a certain limited amount of slots open. But if you are interested in taking advantage of our training, now's the best time to do it with a 60% off special. Go ahead and click on the link that you'll find in the description box and as well as in the chat box. And then the other thing I want to point out, sometimes we want to have a little bit of an extension when it comes to some of the questions because of the way that YouTube works. It's not a truly bi-directional communication that you and I and Mike and you can have. Thus, we have our weekly webinar where we discuss what the role of a cloud architect is, as well as an enterprise architect and other varieties of architects. And also, how would you go about aspiring to gain that type of role, meaning the details. Mike always says there's about 30 to 40 different skill sets, from hard skills to soft skills, meaning technical and non-technical. And we many times discuss how important those non-technical skills are. If you're interested in being able to come off mute, have your camera on, and have an actual conversation with us on Zoom, tomorrow's webinar at 1 p.m. Eastern Time is going to be the perfect opportunity for you to do so, to at least have an extended conversation. But today is today, so let's focus on the Q&A that we have for everybody today. Mike and myself, we do look forward to the questions that you have. As Mike mentioned, these could be career related in regards to what you're trying to eventually become, or perhaps some advice that you're looking for, some clarity in regards to a situation you find yourself in right now, and how you would be able to progress your career development from that point onward. So with that said, Tyrone, let's get started with our first question, please. And it's from Drifting Tangerine. Hi, Mike. When is the right time to start applying for jobs? Is it before or after obtaining cloud certifications and having hands-on experience?
So Drifting Tangerine, it's actually neither one of those. You start applying for jobs when you can actually do the job. And I've interviewed over 6,000 people. And I can tell you right now, Drifting Tangerine, if you go on more than 3 interviews and you don't get hired, there's a problem. And the problem is either in the person's competency or knowledge, which is often the case. It is either in their communication skills or their ability to present, or it's in the ability, it's related to their attitude. So if we don't get hired within 3 interviews, we have to figure out what's wrong. Personally, I've never been in an interview where I didn't get a job offer. And I've usually, so I only interviewed for 5 companies. Well, I only took 5 companies' jobs, and 2 of the 5, they gave me a better offer than the one I applied for. So there's that. So here's what hiring managers need to see when they interview you. One is the hiring manager's got a job to do. So if you don't have the skills for the job, they can't hire you. There's no need for people to learn on the job in today's world, because AI is better than the people that are learning on the job. We need people that are competent, but that doesn't mean you need experience. You just need to be competent, and that doesn't matter. I was hired as a principal architect within 2 years, principal solutions architect within 2 years of the time I went into tech. I was very competent. Now, I did also read for 8 hours a day, every day for the first 2 years. I did do that and learned a lot of other skills along the way. But not everybody would read 1,000 pages a day for the first 2 years of their career. That's what I wanted to do. It was a trade. I traded my youth for knowledge. So when I interview people, I will tell you, of the last 6,000 interviews, realistically speaking, here's what happened. When we interview people, we interview them by what's on their resume. And what's on the resume is what gives you an interview. Typically speaking, I look at the first thing on the resume that doesn't look right to me. And here's an example of what I mean. When someone tries to say they're doing something, and the words and the way they mixed it make it look like they don't really understand what they're trying to say, that is the first thing that I go to. So for example, if someone said, set up the data center routing with BGP, complete network, all BGP, I would look at that and ask that person, okay, let's hear about this all BGP network. How did you do this without an interior gateway protocol? How did you set up your IBGP peering without an interior gateway protocol? And why would I go down that? Because the resume would say, I'm either being lied to, or maybe the person just doesn't communicate well and I need to ask. So that's what we look for. So I need to be able to, when I ask people on things on the resume, they have to be able to answer it. So if the person can't do the job or I can't detect competency, they are not hired. So of the 6,000 people that I tried to hire over the years, I'm going to tell you right now, 5,750 could not do the job. Terrifyingly so. Now, of the rest, what are those other things that you need to be able to do on that interview? The hiring manager needs to know that they want to work with you. They have to like you. They want to be they want to see how you're going to add to the team. They're looking at your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion for the work. They're looking at your executive presence, your emotional intelligence, your ability to go above and beyond, and how good of a team player you are. They're looking at your leadership skills. They're looking at your attitude. That's what they're looking for. But no matter how good the attitude is, in 99% of the cases, you can't hire someone that doesn't have the skills. And the worst part of what happens, and I can tell you right now, as soon as someone gets a certification, and unless it's one of these certifications, If the person has a CCIE or a CCDE, I'm 90% certain they can do the job of a network engineer or network architect. I don't know until I interview them, but I'm pretty sure that they can. Now, if someone has a CEH master or an OSCP, I've got some knowledge. The chances are that they know how to use Kali Linux and do at least a minimal level of penetration testing. If someone has a CISSP, there's a chance that they know something about cybersecurity. That's my favorite intro to cybersecurity. But with the majority of the certifications out there, they're basically teaching you something that is 100% unrelated to the job. For example, in an AWS certification, they teach us the name of the AWS services and how to configure them. Now, as a cloud architect, we don't configure anything, and if I use those proprietary names with my customer, I'll be escorted out of the room, I'll be fired immediately, and my replacement will say, thanks, Mike, for the great job. Because when I speak to clients, I have to communicate them in the language they understand. And I can't talk to them about this exciting EC2 instance when they're going to say, Mike, how is that different than the virtual machines we've had in our data center since 1999? And it's identical, so there's that. So when we speak to clients, we need to know two things. We need to be able to talk about the technology. Okay, client, I'm going to move your 10,000 virtual machines to 10,000 virtual machines on AWS. You know you've got your storage area network and you've got 1.5 petabytes of data. We're going to move your storage area network to a similar storage area network on the cloud. That they're going to understand. We're going to take what you have and we're going to reduce some of the maintenance overhead. And by reducing the maintenance overhead, you won't need as big of a staff and you'll be able to afford less expensive staff. By going to the cloud, we'll be paying more for the services that you receive, which is exactly opposite what they teach you in a certification. But for that extra cost, you'll have much more agility, which will make you more nimble as an organization, easier able to react to dynamic business environments, which could mean you could adopt new services faster, become gain first mover advantage, and use that strategically in your business. So that's what I'm talking about. And in the certification, there's the name of a service and how to configure it, which has nothing to do with the architect role. Now, it has everything to do with the cloud admin role, but nothing to do with it. So what we really need to do is see if you're ready for the job. As far as projects, I interview architects all the time, and I don't know why they're trying to show me their GitHub profile or their Python code or the web server that they built. And I ask them, why are you trying to show me Git if you're telling me you're an architect? And they say, because I want to show you the code I've written. And I say, I need you to design a strategy to improve this business's performance. There's no code in the job. So again, that person is doing projects all day long. Now, if that person that wanted to be the architect talked about writing thought leadership documents, talked about responding to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, talked about presenting architectures at conferences, talked about building ROI models for AI technology and various AI use cases, now that's a project that shows that it's an architect. So it's about the correct skills and being able to be good at it. If you get done and you can't do the job, you can't be hired. And the worst case is you go on interviews until you're ready. Because here's what happens when you go on interviews when you're ready. Everybody will say no to you. They will put, generally speaking, a big red X next to your name so they don't interview you again in the future, which means you burned a bridge. And going on interviews when one isn't ready means you're going to reject it, rejected, 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 rejected. And emotionally, that's exhausting on that person. And by the time that person has actually learned the job and is ready to do the job, they're going to be so sad and so depressed from getting rejected every day that they're going to be burned out and they're going to have a bad attitude on the interview and they're not going to get hired anyway because they're going to look sad and depressed, and people want a happy, positive person when they hire them. So do yourself a favor. Master your craft. And as soon as you're good, get hired. And truth be told, for any of these jobs, there is a lot of wiggle room. For example, a cloud security architect, for example, the pay range is on average 183 to 292. If someone comes to me with good skills, I'm going to pay them closer to the 292. If someone comes to me with weak skills, I'm going to give them, less than the 183, but I'm going to give them a very low salary because I got to then spend $100,000 or $200,000 to train them. So they're going to be paid less. So going in at the right time when you can do the job and do it well means you'll get, you go on 3 interviews, you'll have 2 offers, and then you can negotiate each offer to determine what you want and earn more. So that's what I do.
Yeah, to add a little bit to what Mike said, I'm going to focus on the piece where it says having hand-on experience. There are certifications that we do suggest our students take, but they're predominantly there for branding reasons so that you can stand out. And sometimes what can happen is if you haven't had a job within a particular field, the certifications can give you a little bit of an edge in regards to competition on being able to get that actual interview. Okay, so that's one aspect you got to keep in mind, why certifications might be advantageous for you, especially if you're lacking that first job or just something that shows that you've been in the industry for a little bit. But when it comes to the hands-on, there's going to be two types of hands-on that you're generally going to have as you move throughout your career. One of them is when you tackle certain vendor certifications. Many of them are going to be geared towards the engineering side of the house. So you're going to have to understand, how do I actually build a particular service or particular solution? So for those things, just so that you can pass the actual certification, you'll need some hands-on with the particular solution that you're working with. But the hands-on that we're talking about, and the one that we put special emphasis on when we go through the training curriculum that we have curated for our students, is the hands-on as pertaining to what an architect would do. So these would include creating presentations, creating talks, lectures, things that would give you the ability to practice your public speaking. You're also going to have to work on your sales presentation. What are the aspects of things where you can keep people on a straight line to be able to sell them the solution? How you have a discussion with the stakeholder is going to be a little bit different. How you might talk to somebody like myself, maybe a CTO. That might be more of a hybrid conversation you might have. What about when it comes to your leadership skills and how you have to communicate with those engineers, or perhaps even other architects, right? Those are different type of conversations that you will have to have. And our students will learn that through interactive classes, where they have to give the presentation and learn it. But something else that's really critical is this aspect of group projects. We're in the midst of a group project right now with our students, and that gives them that hands-on of actually looking through a request for proposal, meaning something that the customer is looking for, and they're hoping that you will have the right solution for you, be able to go through that, and then ask right questions so that you can figure out more specifically what are the pain points and what are the pleasure points, because both are important and have to be used at the right time. And these are the type of hands-on activities that we generally encourage anyone who wants to get into architecture, because that's going to be the predominant skill set that you're going to need to be successful. Now, technology is important, but if it's not business driven, learning technology is just a waste of time. So it has to be a combined effort with the focus though on the actual, what we would call soft skills or non-technical skills, and then focus on business driven architecture. So just something in mind so you understand the difference between the actual hands-on experience that you want to have and what the difference is between the two of them.
I asked Tyrone to put up the next question out of order because it is such an important question, and it's the reason people get in a lot of trouble at trying to become cloud architects by doing hands-on work.
All right. So just for the sake of the video, the audio, so we have it, Rayat, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, says, I have 17 plus years of experience in Linux systems administration and want to become a cloud architect. How do I go about it? How do I get exposure in cloud without working on it?
Okay, so Rajat, two things. One is join us tomorrow on the How to Become a Cloud Architect webinar. And Tyrone, put a link to the free ebook that we wrote that talks about every skill he needs to learn to become a cloud architect and what they are. Because Rajat, I want to help you. Rajat, what I need you to understand is there is a massive difference between the way you would have to think to do administration versus what you need to learn and think to do architecture. Let me give you an example. 17 years working on Linux, so you know Linux far better than me. And here's what I would ask you. Could you answer these questions? Could you tell me exactly what's going on in that Linux kernel? Which part of the kernel manages the memory? Which part of that kernel schedules tasks to the CPU? And how that works. Could you also talk to me about the KVM hypervisor and how the KVM hypervisor actually works, how it allocates memory and manages memory? Now, on one of the Linux servers you worked on recently, can you tell me about the CPUs and the number of cores each CPU has and the amount of level 1, level 2, and level 3 cache that's sitting on that chip and how that impacts performance? Could you talk to me about the clock rate versus the number of cores in multi-threaded applications and how that works? Could you talk to me about how Ethernet is encapsulated on the back of that Ethernet card that's coming straight out of that server, or how that PCI bus works. Could you also tell me about the number of PCI lanes on the CPU and how that would pertain to how many GPUs you could put in this car? Now, that server is probably running block storage to the virtual machines that are sitting on that server. Could you tell me how the fiber channel over Ethernet protocol works? When the PC wants to hit the network, can you tell me how the ARP process works? So, what I talked about are some of the things you need to consider in the way the solution is architected. And you can do labs all day long, you can play with it all day long, and most likely you will never learn these things. How do you learn architecture? You take architecture training where they teach you each and every one of the individual modules, how they work, not how to build them, and how they fit together. And it's much like when I learned to practice internal medicine in my youth. You know, they taught us about the eyes, they taught us about the ears, they taught us what went on in the nose, the throat. We learned about the heart, the lungs, we had to learn all the blood vessels, all the bones, all the nerves. And when we knew that, then we could diagnose something because we could see the big picture. That's how we could treat heart attack patients without ever having a heart attack, or treating a drug overdose without handling. So architecture is like medicine. It's like law, where you have to be trained on the individual components, how they work, and then how they fit together. This is the job where no matter how much hands-on time you have, it's not going to teach you the job. Now, I will tell you this, Rajat. I've had sysadmins that have had, 15 years of experience. We've trained them with cloud architect skills, and they've gotten jobs that are huge. Upwards of $300,000 in many cases of people that have good experience as their first architect job. But how do you go from engineer to architect? How do you go from admin to engineer? You have to learn the different skills. And these are not skills you're going to learn how to do. So, if I said to Mark, how would you design the wide area network for an organization that has 10,000 remote locations? Mark's already planning the IP addressing scheme. He's thinking about the WAN. He's thinking about the interior gateway protocol. He's looking at where he's going to segment his systems, whether he runs boundaries and BGP between them. He's already got that stuff going on in his head. And it didn't come from getting on the router and configuring it. It came from learning the protocols, learning the elements, and learning how they fit together. So that's how you do it. You have to be there. So for an architect, you need to get exposure doing architect things. Presenting at conferences, writing architecture documents, managing architecture repositories, leading architecture teams, leading responses for proposals, building a business case to show the organization that the value of the technology solution is greater than its cost to the business. I kind of hope this makes sense to you. But please join us on the webinar tomorrow. I really want the best for you. And I can tell you, I've got experience doing this all the time. And sometimes it's about saying, okay, this is what I have. And you've got a great set of skills. And you can learn, and some of those lessons from those skills that you have are very valuable. So it's a matter of taking what you have, adding those extra things you don't have, adding the new skills, and then poof, you've got a great job and a great career. And I got to tell you, this architect thing is the best thing in the world. I enjoyed practicing internal medicine in my youth. And I got to tell you, I had a senior network engineer job for 3 months. And then they said, Mike, you want to be the lead architect? And I'm like, yes. And that was the last time I had to physically touch the technology. And I have to tell you this, I absolutely loved it. Best thing I've ever done ever since I've been an architect. I can't believe people pay me for this role. I can't believe it, because it's like a hobby. You get to go meet people, talk to people, you're buying people lunches with your company credit cards, you're eating good food, you're drinking good wine, you're going to good restaurants, and you get to meet people and build friendships all over the world, and I've done it. So I love this role.
Yeah. Something I want to add, just to address a little bit what I saw in the chat. It doesn't matter from what current position you come from. It doesn't matter if it's an engineering role, if you come from commerce, if you come from retail. It doesn't matter if you have a tech background or if you don't have a tech background. It only matters what you're willing to do going forward, and if you have the right plan and the right structure in place to be able to execute it. So when I see Rajat or Rayat, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, you got 17 years of experience, predominantly in Linux system administration. That experience is not wasted at all. Here's the thing. If I'm thinking the number 17, there's a lot of things you must have done in those 17 years that were not Linux system and administration based, that you just couldn't fit into the limitations that we have within the chat box in YouTube. But there's so many other transferable skills that you will have. I'm pretty confident that you will have. And if we have a one-on-one conversation, let's say tomorrow on Zoom about it, we can draw those out. And what we can do is we can take that and we can transfer it towards your goal of becoming a cloud architect. Now, the biggest question is going to be, what do you already know about the role? If you know very little, to, let's say, nothing, you should download the free guidebook to give you an idea of what the career is roughly about. Join us tomorrow, ask more questions about it, because it's going to be very difficult to make a decision on something that's going to impact your life as critically as changing a career potentially, if you don't have the right understanding, the right facts, right? You want to be data driven when you make these kind of decisions, because if you take that approach now as you're planning out your career, either with help or without help, that's up to you. You're going to have to already go through that little mind shift change that you'll need to be an architect, because the same type of work you do for yourself in trying to figure out where you want to go is going to be the same thing you're going to be doing for future customers. So again, I want you to see that you can always transfer skills and apply them even as you work on yourself. But definitely join us please tomorrow. You can give us a little bit more of your background, because I'm sure there's certainly a lot more there in those 17 years than just Linux administration. All right, let's take a look at our next question here. And Rajat, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow then, if you can join us at 1 p.m. All right. Our next question is from a view online. It is interviewing 6,000 people. That's approximately 16.4 years of work. Let's say one person a day. Tell us more about Mike's career so far. So they must be very impressed by your interviewing skills. Oh, sorry, there's a little bit more. So it says, please, Mike, who mentored you to be this good?
These questions are from two different people. So
okay, let's go back to the review online, please. All right, go ahead, Mike.
So it's been 25 years, not 16 years. And in my first job, I was already interviewing people because I had to build an architecture team. So here's what I want you to understand. When we would go to hire someone, here's what I would do. If it was really important, I would do 4 people per hour and block out an entire week. Now, I want to put that into context. That's 150 people that I would interview. Most likely not a single person, and that would be able to do the job. And then we'd start going to external recruiters, and that was how hard it was. Now, I've also been building architecture teams for the last 25 years. And let's talk about building an architecture team. You got to go find people to work on the team. You're doing a ton of interviews. I also, to be fair, did participate in what's called an Associate Solutions Architect program. And what an associate architect is, or associate solutions engineer, or as their associate sales engineer, is a lot of companies will hire somebody that's not ready to work. They have no idea how to do the job. And basically someone's out of school and basically they're hired, and it's like you'll pay them a salary of $70,000 to $100,000. And then you'll train them to be a solutions architect. If they graduate the training program, they won't be an associate solutions architect. They'll be a regular solutions architect. And I did a lot of work with people in there, and I was constantly doing mentors and constant internships. And all in all, that gave me about 5,000 interviews over the last 25 years. Now, before I started our program, I had sent some LinkedIn posts out and built some things. And what I did is I interviewed approximately 1,000 AWS certified people, especially in the beginning of this program. And I asked them things like, describe cloud computing to me. Describe what an EC2 instance to me was. Tell me the difference between block storage, object storage, file storage, and when I should use them. How would you design this demilitarized zone? What are the challenges that would be associated with DynamoDB that wouldn't be associated with MongoDB in a modern world of multi-cloud? And any more basic thing that you can possibly imagine. And guess what? Nobody can answer anything. It was terrible. And then we started this program. And now I constantly do interviews and interviews and interviews. So, these are the kind of things that you need to think about. And these are the lessons that are learned. I also work with a recruiting team as well, and a national recruiter that I speak to all the time. So if you're in a world where you're going to be building teams constantly, you're going to be interviewing people constantly. And if you're in a leadership role, do you know what else you're going to be doing? As much as I hate to say it, you have to stack rank your employees every single year. And at the end of the year, many companies get rid of the bottom 5 to 10% in a layoff, and you have to figure out who your best people are, because they're the ones that you keep and you get rid of your worst in most cases. Now, then we're not talking about job types that are eliminated. For example, marketing people in a recession typically get let go. Our recruiters typically get let go in a recession. But of the main teams of people that are there that are doing the work, you typically stack rank them. And part of that is asking people questions and where they want to go and assessing them. So if you're in leadership, you're going to be constantly doing it.
All right, Tyrone, let us move on to our next question. And this is from Joseph. Joseph is asking, Mike, who mentored you to be this good? Because I believe mentorship counts in cloud architect careers.
So Joseph, thank you. I believe mentorship is critical, and that's why our training program is a group mentored program. I will tell you a couple things happened. One is early in my career, I had a couple things going for me. One is I am not from tech. My degrees are in business. I have a master's in business, and I've got a master's degree in healthcare. So in healthcare, they taught us how to ask people the right questions. They taught us something they called therapeutic communications, which is called emotional intelligence and empathy training. And they taught us how to give presentations and how to get people to do things they didn't want, like how to get a patient to exercise, or how to get a patient to fix their diet, or how to get a patient to take a medication that has a side effect, but the side effect is less than them dying. So I learned a lot of that there, and that deeply helped me. I will then tell you that ultimately I went on a certification craze. I decided I wanted to work in tech, and I went and took an MCSE boot camp for like $5,000, and then did a CCNA on my own, and then took an $11,000 CCNP boot camp. Nobody wanted me after that. Did a Cisco Certified Design Associate, a Cisco Certified Design Professional, and nobody wanted me. So I ultimately took it upon myself to call 50 recruiters, starting with people in Silicon Valley, and asked them what you would want in the perfect network engineer. I said, if a hiring manager could have a wish list of what they wanted, could you tell me? And I took the list, ran my statistical analysis throughout the extremists, and built my list. When I got my first job, Joseph, I had a really good manager. His name was Devendra. And I said, Devendra, can I schedule a meeting with the VP? And Devendra's like, what do you want to schedule a meeting with the VP for? He was a little nervous. And I said, well, really two things. One is I want to tell him how awesome of a manager you are. But what I really want to ask is this. What does he want in the best network architects, the kind of people that are going to move into distinguished architect roles and principal architect roles and VP level architect roles? And my manager just, boy, that's a good idea. Nobody's ever asked me this before. So he let me. So I went up to White Plains, New York. I spoke with the VP, and I said, what are the skills you needed? And he gave me some very interesting insights. He said, Mike, more communication skills, more leadership skills, more executive presence, more emotional intelligence. He said, all that medical stuff about you that you keep trying to hide, that's your strength. He's like, your network ability, he said, it's great, but figure out a way to use that. You're going to get further with your business. And then right after that, I passed the CCI exam anyway, when I should have been learning business. And then I took my first principal architect job. At Comcast, I was a principal 2 architect responsible for their backbone. And then poof, I went to a company called Riverstone Networks. They became Alcatel-Lucent Nokia. They've changed names a few times. And I was there as a principal architect. And as soon as I joined Cisco, 2 things happened. One is I had a manager. I was taking a CISSP boot camp, and I fell asleep in that boot camp. And my manager yanked me out of the boot camp back into his office. And he's like, Mike, here's an award for something you've been doing. And he said one other thing to me. He said, Mike, he said, you, like all the sales engineers, because I was a sales engineer that year, doing the same job anyway as I would an architect. But anyway, I was doing that in that role. And he said, Mike, he said, I know we're making you get this CISSP, like every other SE here, which is good. He said, but I got to tell you, stop focusing on your tech. Start focusing on your leadership, your executive presence, your CXO relevancy. Build more of your business acumen, your this. He said, it'll double your salary. And he said, you're the one of the people on my team that can do it. So I went to school. I went and got an MBA. I joined Cisco's most elite architecture team, the Internet Business Solutions Group, and their strategy consulting division. And I was effectively the chief architect for the entire healthcare vertical. And then I was paired with a mentor. Her name was Frances. Frances is an executive coach. She's one of my best friends in the entire world, and she mentored me for years. And then after that, when I started my company again, I called her up as an executive coach, and she coached me again, Frances there. So she was one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. And I always talk about working with coaches. But to be fair, I've got a yoga coach that I deal with and a meditation coach that I work with. I've always had a strength and conditioning coach that I actually worked with in order to optimize what I can do. Because here's the way I look at it. We can learn by making mistakes. And, that's okay. And if we don't have a choice, that's what we have to do. And it's better to do that than not. But if I can ask someone that already knows what the mistakes are and guide me not to make those mistakes, then I can get to my goal very faster. So, Joseph, I do think mentorship is critical, and finding good mentorships is essential.
Yeah, I agree with Mike's last point. I also want you to think of this. Mentorship doesn't always mean that you have 24/7 access to an individual. Just understand that. You can strike up a mentorship relationship every so often, as long as the mentor also understands the need that you have as a mentee. So from just that perspective itself, it opens up a wide door for everybody in regards to who you can pick. Mike said, find somebody who has, walk the walk, that can also talk it. That's, not just flapping his lips, but actually has done it. So just keep that in mind, Joseph. And I'm finding a good community as well. We pride ourselves in the community that we ourselves have because of these aspects, where we have many people also that eventually, in a sense, I guess if you want to call it graduate, I guess they graduate when they get the job. They also come back, and they also are a form of mentors. Many times you need somebody who's relatable to what you've been through or what you're going through, so that it can give you the advice that you need. And sometimes, you know what? Just simple motivation to keep on going, because there's going to be hurdles and obstacles that you'll have to get over. And that's where a mentor can definitely be of quite some help to you in being able to accomplish that. Let's take a look at our next question here, please. From Stephen, what are the key transferable skills that help a business analyst transition successfully into an enterprise architect role?
Well, analyst can mean anything to anyone, so I don't exactly know what you mean by a business analyst. So let's talk about business skills that you might have and how they might transition into a role. So architecture is about optimizing businesses. So if you are familiar with business process engineering and business process reengineering and business architecture development, you will be in good shape. If not, you will need to learn. If you can understand how to look at an organization's capital structure and be able to determine the most optimal way for them to find capital, whether that be issuing of common stock, whether that be borrowing or something to that effect, and you have understanding of the various capital structures in an organization and cost of capital, then you're good to go. If not, obviously it's part of our training program. If you know how to look at a financial statement and a balance sheet and see what's going on, and you're doing that in your job, great. If not, you're going to be taught how in the program. If you have the business knowledge to be able to look at various macroeconomic forces and help that organization make better predictions on products that are going to sell, which things are going to go up, which things are going to go down, so the organization can either pre-purchase or hedge their bets with some type of an option to purchase at a specific price, then you know what to do. And you don't need to be taught it. If you are used to giving presentations of information and taking large amounts of data and aggregating it into something that's meaningful that you can present to the C-suite and the board, you got it. You're already there. If you know how to write reports that include detailed reports for the people that need it, and you know how to write high-level reports for the C-suite that's going to get your point across in a page or two, you already have these skills as a business analyst. If you know how to create and build a high-performance team, and you could be doing in some business analyst roles, and in others you could be crunching numbers. That's why I said I don't know what you're doing in your job. But if you know how to build and lead a team, you are great. Do you know how to create an RFI, RFP, RFQ, or respond to it, which you may be in a business role if you're procuring equipment or asking for solutions? If you have that skill, great, you're already there. So these are the kind of things that people would have in business roles that they would naturally understand. Do you know how to manage projects? I mean, we're not going to manage projects like a project manager, but have you had to manage a project or a team and make sure tasks are done on time? If so, the answer is good. So it's going to be a lot of those kinds of things. But, here's the way I look at it. I want you to think about it. So Jennifer Ema was a mental health tech before we trained her, but it didn't stop JP Morgan Chase from hiring her. Jermaine Houston was selling landscaping gear before he got hired as an enterprise architect at Southern New Hampshire University. Balwinder Kerr was a stay-at-home mom before we trained her, but Microsoft hired her as a cloud solutions architect. Daniel Bosu was a 20-year-old that didn't even graduate high school. By the way, smart as whip, great guy. He's the kid that I said I wish I could adopt because I like him so much. He was hired by JP Morgan Chase without even a high school diploma after our training. Delroy Batt was hired at CDW as a cloud security architect after our training when his last job was an emergency medical technician. Richard Ferrari was hired by MUFG Bank, and his last job was working in the fraud department, non-tech, but he was hired as a solutions architect after our training. Arun got hired at TELUS as a solutions architect, but the job before that was working at Home Depot in a non-tech role. Ivan Tamba was hired by AWS, and his last job was a waiter, and he was a college student. His best friend, Jordan Kitko, also trained with us, also a student at Georgia Tech, was hired by AWS. And the plan is any of you can get anything you need, regardless of what you have or don't have. But there are skills that could be transferable. I bet you have other skills on the list that I don't know about because I don't exactly know what's on your job. And if you want to talk about it on that, how to get your first cloud job webinar, I would be more than happy to.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mike on that in the sense that we don't know exactly what skill sets you currently possess or are required to possess in your position. But there was one in particular that I wrote down that I would say generally a lot of business analysts have, and that's the understanding of business processes and strategies.
Yes.
That is one of the big aspects when it also comes to enterprise, because if you can understand how, for example, business operations function, how the strategies go about and what the objective of the business is, these are a lot of the components that we require to give a certain suggestion to our customers. So if that's one of the skill sets that you as in your current role as business analyst have, I would probably say that's one of the key skills that you will be able to transfer. And then of course, depending on if we ever can have a conversation with you, maybe tomorrow on Zoom or so, we can figure out a little bit more in detail in regards to what we can exactly take and just kind of map to the current role of the enterprise architect. Yeah. So if you're available to do that, there will be a link in the chat box as well as the description box. And if that's the case, Stephen, we'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. to discuss it a little further. But that's one of the key skills that I would say. And for anyone, if you have this type of skill set, doesn't matter if you're a business analyst, if you're something else, if you have that skill set, it's going to be one tremendous skill set to be able to carry over.
Yeah.
All right. And let's go on to the next question, please, Tyrone. So this is from Be Intentional. I am frustrated with how saturated tech is. And coming from a non-tech background, I feel like there's no space at all. Does your program guarantee a job?
So be intentional. Let's be fair about two things. First, there is a critical shortage of technology people. It is so bad that the World Economic Forum is trying to figure out how, with just the lack of cybersecurity people, they're going to make it. There is a shortage right now of 4 million cybersecurity jobs. I can't hire a cloud architect if I try. I can't hire an AI architect after I try. I can't hire a real solutions architect after I try. I can't hire a real network architect when I try. It's impossible to hire someone. Now, there's 1,000,001 certified people that are out there that know almost nothing related to doing the job. So you will have no problem getting a job if you are properly trained. Here's what's improperly trained. Someone that has a CompTIA A+, Net+, Security+, AWS Solutions Architect Associate, Cloud Practitioner, DevOps Associate, and SysOps Associate. Here's what that person generally knows. Not enough to do any single job. And I get these profiles every single day. Now, by comparison, if I had someone that wanted to be a security architect and they had a CISSP, which almost nobody that can't find a job doesn't have, they had a CISM and they had a CCSP, and they married that with an AWS Solutions Architect Professional. From those 3 cybersecurity certifications, they're going to have about 30 to 40% of what they need to know from a security perspective. From that AWS Solutions Architect Professional, they have another 10. So now they only need to guarantee and they only need to fill in the other 60% to get the job. You show me one of those people, I hire them. I don't need a junior person. I don't need an entry-level person. And if you'll recall on our channel about 2 years ago, Tyrone could probably put some links on. You talked about, I said, do not ever prepare for an entry-level job. You will never get hired. And why do I say this? Because AI can do what entry-level jobs did. The cloud made all those entry-level jobs go away. So that's why we can do it. Now, our program's 1,000 hours, and you will stay in our program until the day you are hired. So the only reason you won't get hired is if you quit on you. But here's what I can't guarantee. I can't guarantee that you come to class. I can't guarantee that you do the work. I can't guarantee that when we come to class and I say, I need somebody to give today's presentation, you're going to do it. And I can't guarantee that you study. That's why we can't guarantee you, nor can Harvard, nor can Oxford, nor can Yale, nor can Cambridge, nor can Stanford. None of them can guarantee a job because they can't guarantee your actions. And I don't mean I know that you won't study or will study, but I can't guarantee you. And that's why a doctor can't guarantee any cardiology thing, because when the patient goes home, if they smoke, if they eat the wrong foods, if they don't exercise, a lot of it's related to the patient. But I can tell you, I've got people working everywhere, whether it was Pierre Dassault, who was a 24-year-old sailboat operator who got hired by LeaseWeb in Canada, whether it was Al Legister, who was selling tissues for Kimberly-Clark, who got hired by Deloitte as a senior solutions architect, yes, senior solutions architect at his first job, whether it was Wallace Agana, who was a sales rep who got hired as an enterprise architect from JP Morgan Chase, whether it was Robert Welch, who was in his 60s, worried about his age, who we had no problem getting a job as a security architect, whether it was Vladimir, who was a 24-year-old college student hired by North Highland. It doesn't matter if you have the right skills to get hired. But don't think for a second there's a surplus of technology people. There is a surplus of technology people that have a ton of certifications that you can't honestly hire. There is a surplus of that, but it is near impossible. So I'll give you an example of what I'm looking for. And I'm going to give you an example if I was looking for a network architect or a network engineer. The kind of question that I would want to see for depth. Be intentional. I wanted to see if you could go this deep on something. Mark, I'll give you an example. Mark's now on an interview. Mark, I'm considering the OSPF protocol. I understand that it has something called an LSA, and it builds a database of these LSAs, and then it runs a Dijkstra, shortest path first calculation on this LSAs to calculate the best path. Could you tell me the types of LSAs in OSPF and what these link state advertisements actually do?
I definitely could, Mike. Before I do tell you, there's roughly about 7 different LSAs that we generally do use more often. And depending if we use IPv6, there might be some additional LSAs, or if we use multicast or MPLS, we might use some opaque LSAs. But aside from that, Mike, I am a little bit curious. Is there a particular scenario that you have been considering or that you might have in the back burner that might be a candidate for using OSPF, especially in a multi-area setup, where we potentially might need to use the different type of LSAs so that we can have better loop prevention, but at the same time, be also to optimize our architecture when it comes to the efficiency of the protocol itself?
Okay, so here's what I want you to see. He did the architect thing. He didn't just give me an answer based upon not knowing. He wanted to see, is what I'm trying to do the correct thing? Is it in the best interest of my business? And have I thought things through? He's trying to ask a clarifying question. And now I'm going to say, Mark, realistically speaking, really great question. Here's the issue. We've got about 15,000 locations. So what we typically do is we have our core as an OSPF area 0, and we try to put other regions in similar things. And that way our goal is to constrain LSAs and optimize our routing. So Mark, could you tell me about those LSAs?
Sure. If we're just talking about a kind of like a typical multi-area OSPF,
yes,
we'll be starting off with our LSA1, which is going to bring us topology and reachability information into our core of the network. Now, I would like to say that we're predominantly going to be dealing with Ethernet and point-to-point connections. So we won't have to deal with trying to figure out what we're going to do with the network LSAs, which are LSAs 2. So we're going to take those out so that we can optimize our flooding of our LSAs. But interestingly now, generally speaking, I don't know what the complete design is going to look like for your for those other areas that you might have. They could contain stub areas. They could contain as well as other autonomous injections that may have from outside routes or so forth. So generally speaking, we will be looking just for a kind of like a summary route, the LSA3 route, that's just going to give us an idea of what is sitting out there in the different areas that we might have. And then depending on if we have an internet edge where we're injecting OSPF routes in it, we might also be dealing with external LSA5 routes that come in. So in either case, it sounds like we might have some good idea in regards to the optimization of it. Now, of course, depending if you're a Cisco shop or not, we also might be dealing with LSA7 in case we have not so stubby areas where we're trying to still have an injection of the routes, but be able still to propagate them across the different domains that we may have or the areas. But with that said, Mike, are you planning on doing any type of internet edge where we're injecting, let's say, from BGP into OSPF, any type of routes that we then have to propagate across the rest of the OSPF domain?
Not at this time. Okay, so here's why I showed you this.
Okay.
And here's what I wanted you to see. Did you see the answer he gave me? First, he was methodical, and secondly, he was detailed. It should be very clear to every single person here that Mark knows networking. I hope that makes sense. Now, here's what normally happens. Mark, ask me the same question I asked you, what LSAs exist. And now I'm going to give you what I normally get.
Okay. Hi, Mike. Thank you for being here today. I noticed that in your resume, you mentioned that you have vast experience using the OSPF routing protocol. Could you give me an idea what those LSAs are like, the link state advertisements? If possible, only the 7. We don't have to go down the route of the 9, 10, 11s that we have.
Yeah, it's some part of the OSPF protocol. It sends out something called an LSA, and there's a lot of them.
How many roughly, in your experience, have you seen being flooded throughout the area? How many LSAs?
In my certification, I learned that all routes are sent to 224.0.0.5. Wait, I don't remember which LSA number that is, but there's another one that goes to 224.0.0.6, but I can't recall.
Okay. And you mentioned your certification. Have you worked with this protocol in a production environment, or has this been more a type of thought experience that you have done because of the certifications?
And I'm certified, so I know it. And I've gone to all the routers, and I've typed router OSPF1, and I put a network statement in it. So I've got a lot of hands-on experience.
Okay, fantastic. There's another thing on your resume that I noticed I'd like to discuss with you. Let me ask you that question.
Okay. And that's the way it's going to go. And the next question, he's going to hit me with something so hard, and I'm going to fail because he doesn't trust me. And then the next thing Mark's going to do is he's going to talk to me about cookies and pleasant things for the next 10 minutes so I don't have a bad taste in my mouth when he tells me to leave the office. And then he's going to say, Mike, you need more experience. Because he's not going to say, Mike, you don't know networking. He's going to say, you know experience. No problem getting a job if you are skilled. But that's the key. That's my minimum level of knowledge to know from a network engineer. Minimum. But when I hear that, now I'm getting excited. I may ask Mark one more question. I may not. And now I'm going to ask him what he's looking for, what his goals are, what he wants to do 5 years from now. And now I want to see if he's a fit for my team. But I don't need to qualify it. So think about, can you do that? And if you can, you'll think there's a surplus. If you don't know OSPF the way Mark did, do you know how to even put OSPF properly on your resume? Do you know how to create content around OSPF? And if you're a networking engineer to get people to come to you, you won't. Do you know how to design OSPF if you don't know the way the protocol works? You can't. Do you know how to performance tune it? You can't. Do you know how to scale it to 20,000 locations? I promise you, you can't. You'll have all kinds of problems before you get there. So that is what's going on. You have to have the skills. And that's why we spend 1,000 hours training people as opposed to 20 hours from a certification program.
And I'm going to add this for everybody so they know. Mike said in his response, he said certification. I'm the type of interviewer, if I'm going to see you mention a certification, I generally do some research on that certification. Now, in this case, he mentions networking. I'll know what is included in the certification. So it doesn't matter if it's Cisco, Juniper, and so forth. I know what's included. I'm the type of individual that if you tell me that you got a certification, I actually expect a lot more from you that you know about it, because I know what you went through. I know what you had to implement. I know what is part of the actual certification process. So when it comes to the tech, and this is why I want everybody to be careful. If you claim to know something technical, be prepared to be able to defend that knowledge, especially if you claim there's a certification. Because a lot of these vendors, they put their reputation on the stake for what they put in these certifications.
Yep.
And they expect you also to be good ambassadors when it comes to the knowledge that you garner from there. So if somebody said they have a certification and they can't even tell me there's about 7 LSAs, right? If we kind of do like a rough shot, we don't need to have a conversation. I don't need, then you didn't even pass the simple CCNA, so to say, for you to figure out what you need to do with it. When I say simple, I say simple in the grand scheme of things, okay? Not simple when you're first starting off with. So, and for be intentional, Mike mentioned that there's a skill gap. The skill gap is there because people are missing what is most important in the career. And the idea is to be able to communicate what they learn and how it's going to get applied. A lot of it is just the implementation side. But what do you actually do with that knowledge? How would you explain it to somebody? Can you have a simple, it doesn't have to be an in-depth discussion, right? You don't have to go in the nuts and the bolts of all the technology, but can you have a decent high-level discussion about what you have learned? And it's these skill sets, these are the non-technical skill sets that are lacking. That's why the program that we have, where we have 60% off, focuses so much on these type of skill sets, because the technical, believe it or not, it will come. It will come with time. And you don't even need to spend that much practice on doing it, because as you go on and you work on your soft skills, guess what? You're going to automatically incorporate the technical aspects, because you're going to have to talk about them. You know, we have a 3 to 5 minute presentation for students. They have to prepare it. They have to talk about the technology. So that requires them to structure it, discuss it. They got to practice their presentation skills, their speaking skill, their tonality, on their gestures, right? How they use hands. Sometimes gestures could be just with your eyes, with your mouth, and so forth, the way you move your face. So those are all other ways that you can practice your tech. You don't have to sit there like me and Mike did for, my goodness, I forgot how many hundreds of hours we spent just typing up commands, trying to be competent when we wanted to pass the CCA. This is not what you have to do for this type of career. But being able to discuss it at a high level and then pull in the business. That's where there's not a lot of competition when it comes to these type of roles. And that's where there's a huge gap in it. The lower hanging fruits, think of it like a help desk position or something that perhaps you don't need to develop the ability to persuade, to sell, to present, to have a business driven conversation. Those are the jobs that there are out there, but we don't have the people that are capable or competent of doing them.
Yes. And there's a lot of these jobs out there. It's just we don't have anybody that can do them.
Yep. All right, next question, please. From Stephen, does location play a significant role in becoming an enterprise architect? For example, I'm currently in New York, but considering a move to Austin, Texas.
You know, Stephen, to a degree, not as much as it used to be. So at one point as an enterprise architect, I was living in Princeton, New Jersey. Because being in Princeton, New Jersey, I could go to New York when I needed to. I could go to Philadelphia when I needed to. And that for me was a good location. For a while, I had a house in Palm Beach, Florida, and I had my place in Princeton, New Jersey, and I went back and forth. And then around 2000 and, I guess it was around 2004, 2005, I just moved to Palm Beach full time for a while, Palm Beach Gardens actually, and lived there for a while. And, you know, I'll tell you, if you live in New Jersey, if you live in New York, if you live in Boston, if you live in Phoenix, Arizona, Dallas, Richardson, Texas, Houston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, that Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill kind of Cary area, anything in that area is really good. Charlotte, North Carolina. We think of some other cities, potentially Las Vegas, Nevada, San Jose, California, San Francisco, California, Denver, Boulder, Colorado. If you're in any major city, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work for you as an enterprise architect as a rule. Now, if you lived in a little village in the middle of nowhere, so for example, I have a lot of friends in this town called McPherson, Kansas. It's like the greatest place ever. It's in Kansas. Everybody's nice. It's friendly. I love going there. It also has super cheap electric rates, so I built a data center out there many years ago. But I love going out there. But there's probably not going to be the kind of companies there in that small area that are going to be paying $300,000 to $500,000 for an enterprise architect. But in the more metro cities, you can. But the world has also gotten to be the way it is. So many of us work from home. And since enterprise architecture, if you're working for a vendor, is more of a strategy consulting role, in many cases, you can work for lots of consulting companies and lots of big tech vendors and still work from home. The key with working from home is you've got to do your job and you've got to show everybody that you're doing your job. So if you look at the data and statistics, the key here is productivity numbers have been going down, which is why employers have been begging people to come back in the office, because then the productivities are going down. But you keep the productivity up. And if you're an architect, and here's how you keep your productivity up. You'll have the opportunity to speak at conferences, speak at more of them. You'll have the opportunity to write thought leadership documents, write more of them. You'll have an opportunity to go on more consulting calls, go to more of them. And then live anywhere you want, anywhere in the entire world, and be loved. You'll get promoted and paid more, and your money will go further. So that's the secret to making it work. Good question.
Yep. I agree with Mike, just so everybody knows. We live in a big world that's become actually very small because of the technological advancements we have. I wouldn't put it past anyone that you can actually be working for an international customer or employer and be able to travel the world around it. So in essence, it's sort of remote, but always be prepared to travel. Because if you're a rockstar enterprise architect, oh my goodness, everybody's going to come fishing for you, trying to get a hold of you to be able to get you to go out in clients. Especially if you're working for a vendor that has solutions, you're going to be always talking to customers, many times having to travel there, get a holistic idea of what the business is like and how you can help them be more efficient at doing whatever it is that they're doing, whatever stuff they're working on. So, all right, let's go on to our next question. And by the way, Stephen, if I haven't told you already, if I have, my apologies. Join us tomorrow for the webinar. We can have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation in regard to that. Mm-hmm. And I also want you to be able to review the ebook that we have in regards to what the role is like. That way, when you talk to us tomorrow, you're going to be a little bit more in tune with what the role is like. And then we can dig down into the detail and see what we can do to get you a roadmap so that you can go ahead and actually train for that type of role if that's what you truly desire. All right, Tyrone, let's take a look at our next question, please. So there's a question from Review Online. I am 75 years old. I still don't have enough money, but I am fit. My current age will stop me from getting a cloud architect job. Is that correct? So they're wondering, because of their age, would that in some way inhibit them from being able to become a cloud architect?
I want to know what their age has to do with anything. Why does it matter? To me, I need an architect that's got an understanding for strategy, that can lead a large group of people, that have the ability to drive results, that have the ability to get the information right. If it was 63-year-old Sig Wolf who we train versus 20-year-old Daniel Bozo, who cares? I don't ever care about silly business. Silly business is what, and most people don't. Silly business is what college somebody went to. Silly business is which certification someone holds on their resume. Silly business is worrying about their age or their hair color or who knows what. I worry about results. I always worry about results, and the people I hire are always the best. If someone walks into my office and they're 79 years old and they're sharp and they're motivated and they're good and they're awesome and they've got a level of experience, that's going to help my business. Why wouldn't I use that person? Of course I would. So I honestly don't know what age has to do with it. I know my friends that are really good architects that are in their mid-60s now can get more jobs in a day than they could have when they were 20 because they were big, they're famous, and the world loves their skills and loves their knowledge. So I don't know. Now, I'm sure there's some people out there that will have a bias against people. Sure, but there's enough people that really just want people that are good on merit that don't care. People like me that just hire based on who people are. And if you look at the people on our team, I want you to understand why. Somebody asked why our team's so good. Here's why it's so good. I've got Chris that spent his whole life doing operations. You know what? I'm not an operations person. And he's got it from another industry, so he's not blinded by tech, because many people that come from tech are blinded by tech. Alonzo, yes, is a great cloud architect, but he has 30 years marketing experience as well. Completely different than the kind of stuff that many of others have done. Mark comes to us from Eastern Europe and is a networking guy with a great perspective. Eddie lives over in Cameroon right now, and he brings to us a degree in law. And Tyrone's over there in South Africa, who's a great architect with a big background in sales. Chow came to us from Vietnam, and she came from a family business, and she's a rock star in cybersecurity. So the key is what do? You try to find the best and brightest that have very different educations and very different backgrounds. And by doing it that way, you get people that think differently, and now you solve problems.
Yeah, I wanted to add something for everybody. It is directed towards the question, but in general for anyone. The only person that can ever stop you is you. If you're willing to put in the time, the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears, as we say it, you can accomplish anything that you want to. Now, Mike is 100% spot on. There are people that might look at your gray hair and might consider it, well, if you have gray hair, but let's say age, that might be better, if as a weakness. But there's many out there that are going to look at your age and look at it that you most likely have wisdom to share. You have experience that you can bring to the team. Many times, you are also very valuable in making sure that the other architects that are around you, because as we always say, architecture is a team sport. You don't do things alone. The other people that you have around you, you can be a very good influence to them, being able to mentor them, impart your knowledge, your understanding, your wisdom on them. So just as much as you're valuable to the customer, you're going to be very valuable to the internal team. Now, the biggest thing is going to be, and this is not because of your age, this is just in general because of the different type of cultures that you will find at different companies, is finding the right culture in which you can thrive and where they will understand the strength that you bring to the team. Some companies might view a younger person to be that strength because they're looking for more vigor, more energy. They're looking for a different type of take on things. So just keep that in mind, but you're the only person that can stop yourself from achieving anything that you want. All right, let's take a look at our next question. I believe this is going to be a little bit of a longer one, so just bear with me, Mike, while we get through it. So this is from Anthony Boyd. He's saying, right now, my plan is to build the necessary skills and work on projects before applying for jobs. Certifications are not my top priority at the moment. I have a solid background in technical support and electrical engineering, with experience as a control engineer and an electrical design engineer. Okay. The next part says, I've also worked in technical support across various industries, including robotics and biotech. And then I am aiming to gain enough skills to become a cloud engineer because I believe this path will help me enter the cloud space sooner. My ultimate goal is to use my skills to become independent and solve customers' problems worldwide, possibly as a consultant. Okay.
Okay, Anthony, there's a couple of things we want to address here. One is I think there's a few things. So one is I think it'll take you less time to be an architect than an engineer. And Anthony, before I even answer that, let me tell you why we stopped selling our cloud engineering program. And why there are still so many jobs out there, regardless of levels of experience. If you're competent, and we can talk about that in a minute. So tons of jobs out there for people that are competent. But the big issue is where you want to go. So right now you're not working as a cloud engineer. So well, here's what you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn the network and the data center. And that means routers, switches, firewalls, all that stuff. Then you're going to have to learn how to build everything. That means getting hands-on. Then you're going to have to learn how to code, which you may know how to do, Python, Bash, Windows, PowerShell. Then you're going to have to get really good at systems administration, and then you're going to have to get really good at DevOps. Now, you want to know why I stopped selling our cloud engineering program? Because the bottom 50% of cloud engineers are going to be replaced by AI. And we're already seeing companies get rid of their worst engineers and replace them with AI. I stopped selling a cloud engineering program because AI can write a Terraform script, because nobody's going to be using that management console most of the time. AI can write a Bash shell script. AI can write a Windows PowerShell script. AI can write a Python script. So AI can right now do 50 to 75% of the cloud engineer's job. So why am I hiring cloud engineers in the first place? Now, the next thing, Anthony, to think of is if people are not coming to the office, companies are saying work from home, and people are saying no, why would I hire a cloud engineer in the United States? So what you typically see as consulting firms do is they have people saying in America that actually design the architecture that get paid big wages, and then they hire cloud engineers overseas for a quarter of the salary that would be paid in America. So what you're going to have to learn to become a cloud engineer is going to become incredibly challenging. It'll probably take you 2 years to do it on your own. With a good training program, could probably be an architect and hired in about a year. And when you're done it, you're going to have a job that's going to be very hard to get. Now, the second half of your thing is what you actually said you wanted to do, which was long-term consulting and working with a lot of customers. Here's how you work with a lot of customers. You build long-term relationships with them, and you build relationships with key executives. So that when you quit your job and you say, it is Mike Gibbs, and I'm starting my own architecture consulting firm, client XYZ, we met 5 years ago. I helped you with your $78 million migration to the cloud that I know you got a 3x return on investment with. Could you use any help now? I've got a relationship. I've got a Rolodex of people that I can call. And you'll get that as an architect, but you won't get that as an engineer. And here's the reason why, Anthony. And I hate this. I love engineers. They're like the most important people on the team because they take our plans that we architects create and they build it. But the engineers are treated like a second-class citizen. They don't get the respect, and they will not be speaking with the decision makers, the people that are going to be able to buy from you in your future as a consultant. So if you try to think you're going to save some time becoming a cloud engineer, ultimately you're going to put yourself in a position where it's ultimately be harder for you to get hired. You'll get paid a half to a third of what you could ultimately earn as an architect in your career. And then when you want to go out there and build your business, you're not going to have any contacts, and now you're going to have to spend a incredible amount of money doing advertising and starting from scratch versus having the Rolodex if you were an architect. Now, if you told me, Anthony, that your goal was to be the greatest engineer out there, and you told me that you would be willing to spend 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for the next 18 months, then I'd say that cloud engineering thing could be pretty good. Because now you have the time to learn the network, you have time to learn the data center and really get it. You need to get Linux training. So a minimum level of Linux would be a Red Hat certified engineer for a cloud engineer. And Emmanuel, I'm going to give you a test, and I want you to ask it in a minute because I want to see if you actually can answer cloud architecture questions since you say you have good knowledge of AWS. But those are the things that I want you to think about. Is the next step you're taking getting you closer to your job or further away from your job?
Yeah, and Anthony, there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, I want to commend you for the time and effort you have spent in gaining those various skill sets that you already have. And also taking the first step in understanding that there are some deficits that you have if you're aspiring to move into a consultant career, especially when it comes to architecture, especially in the cloud space. The one thing I do want to caution you with is don't unnecessarily complicate the journey in becoming an architect, meaning don't go necessarily the long way around it. There's something that can happen to you, which has happened to Mike, which has happened to myself. You're going to get yourself into one of these roles, just as you have before, either support engineer, network engineer, or whatever type of engineering role you might have, or whatever fancy title they might just give you because they want to give you a promotion, whatever role you are. The problem with that is sooner or later, you're going to get pigeonholed into that role and into that department of engineering. And it's going to make it very difficult to be able for you to rise above that. Most likely you'll have to jump to another company just to make the transition to an architect. So I would suggest don't try to enter the cloud space as the engineer, but enter as the architect. That way that you don't even have to deal with this whole nonsense of being held down just because you put the time and effort into gaining these engineering skills, which makes you very valuable. But to convince yourself, I want you to do this. Since we won't have enough time to actually dive deeper into this. In the webinar that Mike has tomorrow, he spends about, I believe it's about 30 minutes in the presentation of defining the role of the architect. And he does break down the different skill sets that you both need from a technical perspective and from a soft skills perspective. Show up at least for that 30-minute presentation. Listen carefully to what is being explained to you, how it's being broken down to you. And then I want you to start thinking what I'm going to ask you right now. Is it still worthwhile spending the time, spending my resources, means time and money, and trying to enter the cloud space as an engineer? Or perhaps, would it be best served in your interest to be able to be trained immediately as the architect? Because you already have a very good background in technology, so it doesn't look like you need too much more from that perspective, but there might be other things. I want you to do that tomorrow and then give it a thought If you want to stick around for the Q&A that comes with the webinar, feel free to and then ask the questions. And then if I don't happen to see you, show up next week here in the Q&A, and then let's have a discussion about it. I think what you'll notice is that there seems to be an alternate path that you can take that perhaps might be more financially viable to you and your family instead of the way that you've been looking at it right now. So just figured I'd put that out there. Give it some thought, no pressure, just think about it. All right, let's go to, I want to touch on.
I want to go to Emmanuel. I want to go to Emmanuel because I want to show why people aren't getting hired, no matter how many interviews they do. And of course, if you want to learn how to be hired and how to not apply for jobs and how to get through straight to the hiring manager, attend our free webinar tomorrow. But here's the reason. Is people don't know what AWS architecting is. So regardless of certifications you had applied, you have a couple of interviews which never progressed. I'll tell you why. And you believe it's about prior work experience. It is not. And you can say that you have very good knowledge in AWS architecting. So Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Could you answer these? I've got an organization that has 5,000 remote locations, and they want to use the cloud as a wide area network. How would you design this? Could you answer that? Could you explain the routing? Could you explain the path? Could you explain all the things that need to occur? I'll give you another basic AWS architect question. The organization's weighted average cost of capital is 7.87%. Now, how would you calculate that to determine which would give the customer better cost, either financing a solution or leasing a solution from OpenStack or Nutanix versus AWS? Emmanuel, how would you architect a demilitarized zone for an organization that has 200,000 remote access employees where they're using VPN concentrators in the demilitarized zone? Emmanuel, can you compare and contrast the storage performance I can get in a server in my data center versus the block storage performance I get in the cloud? And could you tell me what I need to do to try and make cloud storage perform almost as good as it could be the data center performance? Emmanuel, could you tell me that given that 98% of organizations are multi-cloud, why I can't use most of the things that are inside of an AWS Solutions Architect Professional certification? Emmanuel, could you talk to me about designing a disaster recovery plan after you've calculated my maximum tolerable downtime based upon what will cause irreparable time to the business, after you've built the business impact analysis, what goes into creating a disaster recovery plan, a disaster recovery strategy, the people that need to speak to the press, the people that need to speak to regulators, the people that need to be active. This is AWS architecting. What's in the AWS Solutions Architect Professional is not enough to hire anyone. And that's the problem. So here's what you won't be doing in AWS architecting: clicking the management console, using AWS names. Now, what you will be doing is leading architectural review boards, creating and maintaining enterprise data models, designing scalable and flexible IT solutions, managing vendor relationships, because in everything it's not going to be AWS, it's going to be hundreds of applications that will be hosted in any cloud provider. Create an architecture that's going to ensure compliance with industry regulations and standards. Participate in strategic business planning sessions and strategic account planning sessions. Manage an IT portfolio and perform IP capabilities and impact analysis. Could you do that stuff? Because that's AWS architecting. So what happens is they do the AWS Solutions Architect Professional and they apply for the job. And we know we can't hire them with that. Now, that's why we don't teach that. That's why we spend 1,000 hours teaching our architects, because you will, on an interview, you will have to convince them why they need to hire you. You will have to pass an interview in front of a panel where you have to deliver a presentation. You will have to show the business relevance of your solutions. You will have to explain and defend the rationales of what you've chosen, and you have to understand the underlying technology. Now, Emmanuel, if somebody only has an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, chances are they don't know the technology in the data center, and chances are they don't know cloud computing. So it's very easy to get you hired. And if you want, I can give you an interview and on tomorrow's free Cloud Architect webinar. And if you can pass my interview, I will call the CEO of a national IT recruiting firm that I know and call her up and say you're ready for the job and see what she can do for you. But I'm pretty sure just by mentioning the word AWS in front of architecting, because there's really no such thing as AWS architecting except for less than 2% of the cases, you probably need to learn. So join us in the free webinar. I'll give you a test, and if I think you're ready, I'll talk to someone that'll put you to a hiring manager.
Yeah. And to be fair, Emmanuel, I'm going to say it this way too. You can be great at your job. You can be competent as beyond belief. But there's an art to interview. It's a skill set that you have to learn.
It's a skill set.
Yep. And unfortunately, there is, and it has happened to us too, right? We don't have a 100% hit rate, where we might have a 90% hit rate, even with some training behind it. But in general, I've seen a lot of good engineers. I've seen a lot of great architects too, not be picked, not because they're not good at what they're doing, but they just weren't great at being able to communicate it effectively during the interview.
Yep.
For whatever reason.
Yep.
Sometimes it could just be nerves, right? We kind of psych ourselves out too much. We become our own worst enemy. So in your case, to be fair, let's say you're fantastic with the tech, you're also fantastic in the non-technical aspects of it, but perhaps it's the interviewing. Maybe you just need some training on how to answer the interview questions, how to go about it, what's the psychology behind certain questions that you get. Now, we won't necessarily know that unless we get to speak to you, either through a call that you can schedule, we can discuss certain things, see how the program might fit your needs, or maybe through the Zoom session that we have tomorrow during the webinar. Yeah. Being able to kind of baseline and have a benchmark in regards to what your interviewing skills is right. Because it could be, maybe that's all you need to get yourself over the hump. But if it's not, but if it's not, I want you to do this, and this counts for everybody. Be honest with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself on what you're potentially lacking compared to what you have, you're never going to get ahead. You're never going to be able to progress. And the only person you're really going to be hurting by not being honest is yourself, not anyone else. So believe in yourself, but be honest and understand what skill sets you may need to work on and which skill sets you have, but perhaps you can refine a little bit to make yourself stand out a little bit more. But in either case, if you do want to get a better understanding, talk to us tomorrow. We'll see if it's just an interview type of skill set necessary, or perhaps we may have to just refine, those rough edges that perhaps you have to be able to get you over the hump. All right. Let's go to the next question, please, Tyrone. Let's see what we got cooking. You guys are doing fantastic with the questions today. Love them. So this is from Review Online. It says, the jobs you intend to prepare people for seem to be quite limited in number, and that's only with very large corporations.
Well, there are an incredible number of these jobs, and Mark, you can talk about it as well. Incredible number of these jobs. Now, generally speaking, they're less leader jobs than worker jobs. But Review Online, what you have to understand is, while AI kills engineering jobs because AI can code, etc., AI creates more architect jobs, because architects are there to say, okay, I've got this tech tool now, how can I apply it to solve a business problem? So as we've got new AI, as we've got more cloud, as we've got higher speed networking, as we've got more big data things we can do, companies are saying, I need people that can help me figure out how to use this stuff. That's the architect job. So the companies that are going to pay someone, depending upon an architect, we could be dealing with a solution architect after our training program getting paid $150 to $250. We could be dealing with an enterprise architect earning $250 to $350. We could deal with the chief architect getting paid $1 million a year. So they're not going to be working for small businesses with 3 people. They're just not. They're going to be working for big businesses that tech is a strategy. So that means all the cloud providers, AWS, Azure, Cisco, Google, HP, Dell, IBM. It also means all the consulting companies, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's also all the biggest enterprise companies in the world, which is pretty much anybody that's got more than 5,000 people in that organization is going to have architects. Now, the small consulting firms and the cloud providers have what they call they call them startup architects and small business architects. And what they will do is they will work with value-added resellers that will resell the AWS stuff. And they will hire cloud architects and solutions architects, and they may be coming up with 8 or 9 small business designs per day, as opposed to the kind of architectures that I work with that take a team of 15 to 50 people 6 months to 12 months to actually design. So there are architects that work for lots of companies. A whole bunch of small businesses employ a bunch of cloud architects, solutions architects, network architects, and they do consulting. So there's a lot of companies that have these jobs. Also, all the phone companies tend to have these jobs. The internet service providers have these jobs. all the banks, all the global retailers, pretty much every big business out there.
My question to you, Review, would be limited to what? What are we comparing architecture to? If we're comparing it to help desk jobs, you're right. There's definitely a lot more help desk jobs, but there's also a lot more turnaround when it comes to help desk jobs. Are there perhaps more engineering jobs than architecture jobs? Now there, it depends on your location, where you're at. An interesting thing about the architecture jobs is, and you said what we're preparing people for, the skill sets that you take from the program, yes, they will definitely prepare you for the architecture career. But we've had plenty of people be able just to take the skill sets that they learn there, both the technical and the non-technical, and be able to promote themselves into higher positions as they progress through the career development. So I would definitely look at it from a perspective, especially like an opportunity cost and a return on investment. The skills that you do learn will basically pay for themselves in a short period of time, even if you don't go and aspire to be an architect. Because remember this, Review, being an architect is not for everybody. Just like being an engineer is not for everybody. Yep. Not everybody wants to be a heart surgeon too. You know what I mean? Some people like to be Formula One drivers. Others wants to be football players. Others aspire to become, let's see, what else do we have? Chefs.
Nurses, doctors, chefs.
Nurses, doctors, practitioners, chefs. They want to become, listen, traders. They want to become stock traders, Forex traders, commodity traders, all types of different things. But here's the interesting piece. And I can't give away a little bit too much. We'll probably bring that out in a couple of months. But no matter what profession you're in, the most important aspect of that is always going to be the human factor, which is going to be relationships and the trust that you build with these people. So that's what's actually at the heart of the entire training program that we have, is to build up your non-technical skills so much that it doesn't matter what profession you're in, you can connect with people. You can relate to them, they can relate to you. And that way you're building that circle of trust with the people and that you have around it. And that in itself, those skill sets that you learn will propel you forward. Now it's going to be your choice depending on if it's the right fit for you. Do you want to be an architect or do you want to be something else? But I can tell you from all the things I've heard, and you can do your own research if you like, go ahead, research it, reach out, look at some of the testimonials. If you can get a hold of some of the students, ask them. You will see definitely that it's not the role itself, but it's the skills that you learn in it that make the people successful, not the role itself.
Yeah, I'm going to get to the second half of this. So as I describe the role, it is not a very technical role, Review. It is not. Having said that, you still have to pass the interview. So I get people pretty deep because they've got to clear the interview. And if I interview Mark for a network architect job, and obviously you could see he's competent, I'm going to be less critical on Mark than I would be if a person popped in with a CCIE that has 6 months experience or no experience. Because you could be like me, where as soon as you started networking, you did a CCIE or something within the first couple of months. So, that's the key. So if it's your first interview and you have an imperfect resume, you have to be better. So I get people pretty deep on networking and data center. Now we do labs. Now here's the reality, what I tell my students, labs are optional. I don't care if my students do the labs or don't. I almost would prefer they don't do the labs, but some people just want to build it. So we do labs on AWS, which again to me are throwaway labs. We do labs on Azure, which to me are throwaway labs because cloud architects aren't going to do these things. Now, what I do, which is way out of the normal, and I'll tell you why I do it, is I have people VPN into our data center and start by building every component that makes the cloud possible, and then building their own cloud from scratch. And why do I do it? Well, if you look at what employers are looking for, they're looking for the most competent. They're looking for the most energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate. They're looking for the people that are willing to go above and beyond. And they're looking for people that know their limitations. So here's why I do what I do. One is if anybody ever says, have you touched it? I want you to be able to say yes. But more importantly, when your competition goes on an interview and they say, I set up an S3 bucket, and I'm the hiring manager and I say, yes, I taught my friend's 6-year-old daughter how to do it in less than 5 minutes. Thank you. That's not why I'm going to hire you. So instead of somebody saying, I set up an S3 bucket or made a WordPress site, my students can say, I designed and built and owned cloud for an enterprise's computing needs. Now, who's a little more motivated? The thing that a 6-year-old girl could do in 5 minutes of lessons is the person that built their own cloud. Who's willing to go above and beyond? Who's more energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate? So there's a lot of what we do on the brand side, on the psychology side, to make our employees look better to the employer. And here's the reason. Generally speaking, we can't hire someone that doesn't have the skills. Now, I will tell you, a little over 25 years ago, I interviewed this gentleman. His name's Shanur, and his first name began with a G. And he had come to me on a networking interview. And I had just interviewed about 60 people for a network engineering job, and the first 60 people lied to me. They lied to me about their resume. I asked them questions, and they lied to me. And finally, Shanur G comes in. I asked Shanur a question, and he couldn't answer it. But I liked the answer he gave me. I liked his attitude, energy, enthusiasm. Then right after that, I asked Shanur another question, and he gave me a reality answer. Mike, I've just not had a chance to work with it. I wish I could. I love this. I'm interested. I'm like, okay. So I finally said to Shanur, what do you know? And this is for WorldCom, which is now Verizon, for a network engineering position. And he said, Mike, I know Windows NT. And he said, I know that's not networking. So I asked Shanur questions about Windows and domains and trusts and all this weird Windows NT stuff that I knew from my MCSE. Wow. Shanur knew all of it. And I said, Shanur, are there any challenges? He says, yeah, I can't work past noon on Friday because I have to be home by sundown. So I have to take half days on Friday because I live 3 hours away. And then I went to my manager, Devendra, and said, we have to hire Shanur. And my manager says, is Shanur a good networking guy? I'm like, no, he's got some networking to learn. Is he a good this guy? I'm like, no, not really. So my manager says, so why are you hiring Shanur? And I said, because this guy's attitude, energy, enthusiasm is some of the best I've ever seen. I trust him. My gut tells me that if we hire him and we train him, this was a while ago, he's going to be awesome. Well, Shanur spent 17 years working for that company, and then he became a CEO that distributes technology to developing nations to make sure everybody has a fair chance. I'm proud of Shanur. But what I learned out of that experience was, and it came also out of Robert Cialdini's principles of influence, when people like you, they're much more likely to hire you. So we cover every aspect on our program, from teaching you how to be more likable to giving you things that are going to make you stand out. And they're not always going to be straightforward, but that's why we do what we do. We even brought in, teach cognitive behavior therapy. We actually teach meditation and even yoga to teach people how to stay calm. Because all the emotional intelligence training in the world won't solve you if you've got a temper or you can't control your emotions. And if you can't stay relaxed on an interview, you're not getting hired. So we do a lot of stuff that's going to look a little goofy from the outside. And admittedly, it looks a little goofy. I almost didn't even know how we were going to explain some of the things that are on our syllabus, but they work.
Yeah. And Mike, I wanted to bring up this question too from Review Online, as you mentioned it, because, okay, you make a good point there, okay? It sounds like maybe there's some contradiction. Mm-hmm. But I want you to think of it this way. And I know not many people think from this perspective, but when you design a curriculum, you do this type of what we call instructional design. That's what it's actually called, where you take the different aspects and design phases of coming up with a actual program. You don't create the entire program to be able to satisfy every learning style in depth. What you do is you focus on one particular learning style, and then what you do is you sprinkle in aspects for the other learners. So for example, an architect would generally be a person that is going to be classified as what we call a talker. Basically, they like to discuss the information, especially to make sense of it. And then we also have the researching type. Those are the people that like to read, try to analyze, try to understand what they're reading. And then in extension, they want to have a discussion, but more of an intimate discussion. And that's what generally a lot of the curriculum is structured towards, those two. But for those that are either going to be what we call doers, right? They like the step-by-step aspect and getting hands-on. That's what these labs are for, to be able to satisfy their need in having to touch the technology to be able to cement the concepts a little bit more for them. Yeah. And then there's also another reason, just so you know, we do tell people that you should get at least 1 or 2 cloud certifications, especially if you've not entered into the actual field before of doing that type of role, right? Because you want to be able to somehow demonstrate to somebody, especially if you can't have a conversation with them immediately, that you have potentially some type of technical knowledge. So because we actually suggest this to students, we do provide them as a bonus the ability to use the labs so that they can get ready for the certification.
Yep.
But don't misunderstand this in no shape or form, is that the focus of the program. The focus of the program is to make sure that we gear everybody up to become experts at the non-technical aspect of the job.
Yeah.
Because that's actually the more difficult aspect of the job compared to the technical. You'll spend anywhere, even as a cloud architect, probably 60+% on business, on trying to talk to the customer, figuring out what their needs are, what their desires are. You'll have to learn how to take the technical requirements, actually not technical, the business requirements, put them into technical form so that you can communicate with the rest of the team. So it's the bottom end, right? That bottom-up approach, that's where you need the technical depth to a certain degree. But I'm going to put it this way to you. If you ever go in an interview as an architect, let's say this is an actual architect position. I'm not talking solution architect. Solution architect, you'll need more technical depth, generally speaking, to perform that type of role. But as an architect, if you ever go in an interview and they ask you, have you ever run a Terraform script? Have you ever done any Python programming? You're sitting in the wrong interview if you thought this was an architect position. Go ahead, Mike.
Or it's a test. Or it's a test to see how you respond.
Yeah.
Because I was given that test. I was given a test of, Mike, how's your coding skills? And it was a while ago. And I said, it's interesting you asked that question. I said, my expertise is helping organizations achieve results from their technology spending. Most organizations in that 70 to 80% don't yield results. But if you look at my clients, you can see the return on investment. You can see the improvements in their business processes. You can see the digital transformation. You can see improvements in operational efficiency. You can typically see improvements in top line revenue. That's my area of expertise. And the person, oh, thank you. You have no idea how many people that want to code here are coming in for architecture interviews. And that was just a test to see if I actually knew to code or if I knew that not to do that. So any of these things can be there. But here's the thing. There's visual learners, there's auditory learners, there's kinesthetic learners. And we try to put in media for some people to learn hands-on because of the kinesthetic learners. They're better that way. Visual learners, we do video, audio. To learners, we have sound. So you've got to do everything for everyone.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Finn. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say there is a follow-up from review online. I'm going to read that. It kind of ties into this. I don't know if Tyrone can actually pull it up already, but he said that my English isn't very good. And as a cloud architect, so he was able to pull it up. So we'll pull this one. It says, my English isn't very good. As a cloud architect, I work with senior management. So because my spoken and written English skills are poor, I wouldn't qualify for a cloud architect position, right? So tying that back to all the other questions that you have, the question is, who's feeding you such information? Who's giving you this idea that because your English is not your predominant language or primary language, nor is your written skills up to par? Again, who are you comparing yourself to? And then the other question is, in the country that you're living in, is it expected for you to be proficient in English to be able to work as a cloud architect? If that is a requirement in the country that you're living in, then guess what? It's actually worthwhile endeavor to put time and effort into becoming more proficient in using the language that is required by the company that you're working for. And don't be fooled. There's a lot of international companies that a lot of their architects, they don't necessarily need to speak fluent English. They could have counterparts in those countries that will assist them with working through these different solutions when it comes to a different native language. But if your native language is not English, guess what? Your headquarters might be based in a country that's not the United States. It may not be a requirement for you to do so. So I would not necessarily look at that and immediately throw in the towel. That's a saying in the United States, we throw in the towel. It's like a boxing reference, right? That you give up. I don't want you to give up, but I want you to realistically look at the circumstances that you're in and then ask yourself, in the country that I'm in, is it required? If I want to work in a different country and English is the spoken language, at least from a business perspective, what do I need to do to perhaps be a little bit more efficient in my speaking and as well as my writing in English? And then come up with justifications in regards to if it's worth putting in the time and effort to do so. But that is my 2 cents. Again, I just don't want you to give up. I want you to actually analyze all the possibilities you have and then make a decision. Mike, any thoughts?
So, review online, I have 2 things. One is I'm going to address what I think is the actual real problem here and the bigger problem. And the others I'm going to talk about the language. You must be able to speak precision language. That is clear. Let me talk about the difference between precision language and English as a second language. English is a second language for me and Mark. If I tell you to close the lights, when I mean to shut off the lights, that is still acceptable language. It's not primary English speaker language. In America, they say turn on the lights, shut off the lights. In Greece, we say turn on the lights, close the lights. So that is still fine. Now, if I say this ain't good, now that will not work as an architect. If I babble in directions, so if we've got a problem, but we actually haven't gotten to the bigger issue, which I actually want to deal with in a minute, which I actually think is a much cause of concern. So if you can't speak well, if you can't speak precision, any high-paying job will be out of reach. Because in any high-paying job, you're going to have to communicate precision, whether it's flying a plane, whether it's being a physician getting information, whether it's being an attorney, whether it's being an architect, whether it's being a financial consultant, whether it's being a management consultant. So the communication we have to see. My bigger concern for you everyone online is I think you're afraid of success. And I think you're afraid to be successful. And I'll tell you what I mean. And after about 20 years of coaching people for high performance, I've found some people that look for all the reasons they can't be successful. Is my age too much? I can't be successful. It looks like there's not a lot of these jobs, which is a thing for maybe I shouldn't try so I don't have to worry about being successful. My English isn't good enough, worrying about being successful. That is you looking for obstacles to keep you from becoming successful. And I can see it. I've seen it in the gym. I've seen people that couldn't get to a certain point. I've seen it in sports competitions, and I've seen it with a lot of people. You deserve to be able to do whatever the heck you want, and you can do, say it with me, anything you want that you put your mind to. So the big question is more inside of you. What do you need to do to get to your next goal? What do you really want? Because I promise you, you can do it. It doesn't matter what it is. Now, when I go to Greece, and I taught at Athens University at the Mediterranean IT conference, I got to tell you, when I go to Greece, they all say, where are you from? And we say, what do you mean we're speaking Greek? And they're like, Mike, where are you from? Your Greek grammar is not so great. It's like, well, I spent most of my life in Philadelphia. But, the point is having an accent, fine. Having an international flavor of English, fine. Having poor grammar, problem. And that's really where we want to go with this when I'm trying to communicate. If I can say block storage is a type of storage area network where you take your data and you break it down into blocks. Why cloud providers use block storage is it decouples the storage environment from the server environment. Therefore, as long as you've got IP connectivity to your storage and your server, you can connect the two. By decoupling the storage from the servers, I can incrementally add storage to my data center and our compute and never run out of storage. The reason block storage works is because typically when we write into file storage on an internal hard drive, the data is broken down into blocks. And the way block storage works, we take our data and break it down into blocks. It can look and feel like a virtual hard drive, and therefore block storage is used as a virtual hard drive in cloud computing. Now that shows me you understand it and you got it all clear. If you had some funny French is your primary language and you get a couple of words in English and French goofy, that doesn't bother me. But if it's bad grammar, if you can't get your point across, if you're talking to me instead of the way I did it, if you're telling me this EBS thing, and then you're telling me commands, and then you're telling me this thing, but you're not telling me what is it, how does it work, why do I use it, then no matter it is, I can't hire you. So I hope that helps. But, we have to be able to speak precision English. And for people that can't communicate well, they'll have to learn to communicate well to be successful. But we have communication skills training here. But the key is don't be afraid for you to do whatever you want. You're 75, great. You've had 75 years of life. That's incredible. What have you learned? What do you want to do? And know you can do anything. But don't doubt yourself. Because that's a challenge I see after coaching people that really holds people back.
All right, let's take a look at another question. Tyrone, if you can pull up the question from Anthony Boyd, please. I'll address it for everybody. It might be a little bit easier, even though we addressed it for him in the chat. So Anthony Boyd says, thank you all for the detailed response and advice. I'll take the time to review everything you've shared. Is the meeting tomorrow from this YouTube channel or Go Cloud Careers?
Anthony, it will be on Zoom tomorrow. And the reason it will be on Zoom is I want you to be able to ask us face-to-face questions. And if you say you're struggling something, I want to be able to talk to you about what that is. I want to be able to hear your goals and ask probing questions because I really want to help you. So
yeah,
kind of think about that.
Yeah, and something to give you a little bit of idea, Anthony, as a way to be a little bit more cognizant of how people feel, YouTube, there's potentially millions of people that might see what you type, that might see what you say. So we don't want to put unnecessary pressure on people. So Zoom allows us to have an intimate group where there's not millions of people there. Sometimes, 50, 60, maybe 100 people sometimes, but still relatively small compared to what we get on YouTube. And we do this because at times there's people that want to share certain details about where they're at in their career or what they're doing. And it may not be appropriate to, or they may not feel comfortable putting that out in the public for whatever reason that may be.
Yeah.
So that's where Zoom comes in. It allows us to be able to have a little bit more of an intimate conversation with those that don't feel as comfortable having that type of interaction on YouTube. So that's why we do it on Zoom. And that's why also we recommended that if you have the time, go ahead, as you mentioned, look through some of these resources, get your mind prepped, get it primed for what the webinar is going to be. And then we can have that conversation in regards that's going to be a little bit more tailored in what you need compared to a little bit more of the general type of advice that we can give or guidelines on YouTube. So I hope that helps kind of define it for you and everybody else as to why we do it on Zoom compared on YouTube.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take another question here, Tyrone. And this is from Cloud Doctor. He says, hello, guys. How technical do you need to be as a cloud architect compared to a solutions architect?
Okay, so this is one of these questions. So the first question is, how technical do you need to be to do the job? And how technical do you need to be to pass the interview in the first place? So I'm going to break it down. How technical do you need to be able to pass the interview? On your first interview, you have to be able to answer some solid technical questions. Not how to, but more about the technology and why the technology. So there is that I want you to understand. Now, when you actually get in the job, in either of these jobs, what you're going to notice is you're never going to touch the technology ever again. You'll be looking and conducting architecture maturity assessments. You'll basically be leading a proof of concept team of the engineers that are going to build it for you. You'll be documenting and doing knowledge transfers. You're going to be working on enterprise-wide security architectures with the security teams. You'll be looking at impact assessments of proposed changes and architectures. You'll be developing mobile and digital strategies. You'll be ensuring that the IT systems can support the organization's needs. You may lead an architecture review board or look to optimize an organization's portfolio, provide technical guidance for teams, creation of governance policies. So in any of these architect roles themselves, they're not going to be very, business oriented. And as you move up through the ranks, it's going to get less and less and less technical. So, Tyrone, I want you to share this for me real quick. Hold on, share screen window, because this will kind of potentially help you. So, Tyrone, if you can share that PowerPoint slide. If we look at the bottom, and as we move up the architect types, you earn more. If we look at that solutions architect, we're more focused on designing the tech across a single vendor. So designing a saleable and secure solution. Solutions architects generally work for a vendor. They're generally pre-sales, so they're going to do a lot of pre-sales and a lot of customer meetings. You're going to be looking at the infrastructure. You're going to be looking at the cost analysis as a solutions architect. Still be doing some disaster recovery planning, thinking about migration strategies to a single cloud, and leading a proof of concept. So, as you can tell, they're all business things, but they're more at that tactical level. Now, as you start moving up into a cloud architect role, well, now you're not just dealing with just AWS or just Azure, and nobody's just AWS or just Azure. Now you're dealing with the reality of the world. And that's why, for the most part, you can only work as a solutions architect for 2 to 3% of the companies out there. The rest of them are cloud architects. So here's where you're going to be designing the real things, like 98% of organizations that have a hybrid multi-cloud solution. So you may be designing private clouds, which is great because if people leave the cloud because it's cost, you could design their data center, you're still employed. You're designing a multi-cloud, a hybrid multi-cloud. Now, because you're dealing with all this cloud stuff everywhere, now you're dealing with everything. You could be dealing with 500 or 1,000 different applications themselves. You could be dealing with 50 vendors, 100 vendors, or something to that degree. So now you're going to be doing a lot more stakeholder management, a lot more vendor management. We're going to be looking at cloud governance frameworks to across all our clouds versus our single one. Now we're getting into high availability solutions because you really can't go true high availability on a single cloud because there's still many single points of failures. Now we're looking at cloud adoptions and migration strategies across our clouds. We're evaluating many more third-party products and services. So there's that. Now the next level up is the enterprise architect. Now here's the highest paid. This is the least technical of the bunch. Now it's all about technology roadmaps and re-architecting business processes and looking at the risk the organization has, business risks, IT-related risks. Now it's much more alignment of the people, the processes, and the technology. Now it's about enhancing the organization's agility and flexibility to be able to expand and contract when needed. Now it's governance standards and best practices across a global enterprise. Now it's about future state architecture models and a lot more gap analyses between current and future states. So what's my point? The point is these jobs themselves are not very technical. In fact, David Lithicum and I, he was Deloitte's chief cloud architect, chief cloud strategist, and he said, it's not a technical role. So I can tell you as the last time I touched tech as an architect was 25 years ago because we're not allowed to touch our clients' technology. I can tell you that 90% of what I do as an architect is give presentations, facilitate meetings, lead teams, create documentation, create architectural review boards, create architectural repositories, speak to the press, present at conferences, respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. That's my day. So there's really not a lot of tech in that. But I may have a client that's got, let's say, 1,000 applications. Let's say 15,000 remote locations. Let's say 200,000 IP addresses. Let's say 10,000 routes in the routing table. Let's say they're connected to 2 different internet service providers in 3 parts of the room, in 3 parts of the world. They're also connected to 2 cloud providers at the same time, and they've also got data centers. That's my reality. And when you're in that world, understand, you can't dive deep into any of this. The second you do, you lose your focus. So the job itself, not very technical. Now, the solutions architect's the least strategic. It's the lowest paying. And you're dealing with only a single vendor. So the only place you're really working as a solution architect is AWS, Azure, Google, Cisco. And when you're a solutions architect in one of these companies, you design, present, and sell their stuff. But because if you're not working at that company, you won't know that company's stuff as well as they will, but you have to deal with the reality of the world, which is a lot more companies. I kind of hope that helps, Cloud Doctor.
Okay, let us take a look at our next question here, please, Dora. And this is from Review Online. How many students are in your cohort at a time? 0.
We don't do cohorts ever.
Go ahead, Mike. Explain why there's 0.
We will never do a cohort. The cohort is the worst thing that anybody can do. And I'll tell you why all the boot camps with cohorts tend to fail. So the first thing that I need you to understand, the best way to learn is to be around a wide variety of people with a wide variety of skills. So if you graduate medical school, when you do your residency, you're going to work with physicians that had 25 years experience. You're going to work with people that have 3 more experience. And if you're brand new and you just graduated and you're an intern and you know you don't know anything, you're in a room full of other smart people. Now, I've been a martial artist since I was 14. So you can imagine how many martial arts I've done. Now, do you know what happens when you walk in a room and they have all white belts in a class and nobody's ever done anything before? Now you're in the class and they say punch. And you don't know if you did it right because everybody you're watching doesn't know either. And now you're in a group of a whole bunch of people that are completely lost. So if I did a cohort and took everybody in that was completely lost, who's going to work with whom? It'd be a disaster. So by not doing cohorts, I can do 2 things. One is I have people that are ready to graduate today. By graduate, I mean getting hired, because graduation for us is not some silly date. It's when you are hired, and that's why we've got such a great degree of success in getting people hired. There's that. And by not running a cohort, I can keep you there. Now, also, we're working on an architecture project right now with my students. I've got some students that are with me for 9 months that are ready to get hired, and they're going to be the leads on this architecture project. I also have some people that were with me for, say, 3 or 4 months. They're going to help them in this architecture project. And I've got people that signed up just yesterday. They're going to be in this architecture project kind of watching and going, uh-oh, what is all this stuff? And that's what we expect. Because the online portion is self-paced and goes in order. But the live classes, we consistently repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And I do that because some people don't learn as fast as others. Some people learn faster than others. And I want to have a program that if it takes someone 14 months to hire it, I can say you can stay in it for the 14 months. And if somebody gets hired in 3 months, I want them hired in 3 months. But I don't want any arbitrary anything. My only concern is the outcomes of our students. So we have constant students that are at all phases of our program, and they stay until they're hired. Hope that makes sense.
All right. We're going to take one more question before we wrap up the session, everybody. If you have more questions, make sure you join tomorrow's session, 1 p.m., the webinar. You can ask more questions in regards to the actual role and career development and so forth. But Tyrone, let's pull up the last question for today, please. And this is from, oh, wow, you're really going to make me count. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, gringo. They're asking, can a person aim directly for enterprise architect, or does it require going from solutions architect to cloud architect, etc.?
Okay, so there is no hard and fast rule. So Nafuli S was a student of Mars. He took our cloud architect program, and the first job that he got was a chief technology officer, which is an enterprise architect. I will also tell you that Jermaine Hufton was selling landscaping gear before he came to us, and his first job out of our program was an enterprise architect, never worked in tech before in his life, just like the previous example. I will also tell you that Wallace Agana was a sales rep, left sales, worked for us, went to school for us, and then got hired by JP Morgan Chase as a enterprise architect as his first job. I will also tell you that I actually have my enterprise architects and my cloud architects together. Basically, most enterprise architects know very little about technology. They're mostly just business people, and then they struggle. And most other architects don't know enough about business to actually create a strategy that works. So what I do is I have a super architect program for my enterprise architects, and I put them in the cloud architect program because the enterprise architect program includes our cloud architect career development program, and then I give them the extra stuff. Like tonight, we're going to work on business process reengineering for a type of manufacturing change. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that an enterprise architect would do. So by doing it that way, I've got special enterprise architecture class mixed with cloud architecture classes with a little bit of networking and security, so my enterprise architects can do it. Will you get your first enterprise architect job? I don't know. Potentially, yeah, if you're trained right. But what's the worst case if you get a $200,000 plus cloud architect job as your first job? And that could happen too. And I've also had people like Pratipal Sejan that had been in tech for a long period of time that I got trained, and they got their first architect job in as an enterprise architect. But be fair, I've done it for people that have never worked in tech. But it's more likely you take a program like ours, you get hired as a cloud architect, a solutions architect. You do that for a year or two, and then you get hired as an enterprise architect. But honestly, you could get hired as an enterprise architect too. And what's that going to be really dependent upon? It's going to be dependent upon how good you are on your interview. Will they see you as that strategist, or will they see you not? If they can see you and feel you, again, they can feel the weight of your executive presence, and they can see your leadership skills, and you can walk in and command the room, Yeah, you can be hired as an enterprise architect, but it's all based on the manager. But the point is yeah, you can do it. And, it's what I've done. It's the role that I actually prefer. I started technical, and when I was able to forget more about the technical, which as you can tell is still in me, especially in networking, and focus more on the business, that was when my career took off. And that's really what I tend to like. So I hope I answered your questions on there too.
Yeah. And just so everybody knows, sorry, Mike, I just wanted to point this out for everybody. The Enterprise Architect program has been basically flying off the shelves because a lot of people have, after a little education, a little bit of research, they've noticed that irregardless of their background, doesn't matter if they're technical, non-technical, it doesn't matter if they're young or if they consider themselves a little bit more gray-haired or older, the Enterprise Architect program has been a godsend, so to say, for them because it allows them to focus on these things where they can bring in either all their experience over the years, that wisdom that they have from having gray hair, to the business aspect, or other people see it just as understanding that they're not limiting their income when it comes to going after enterprise architecture because of the technology aspect always being the last thing considered compared to the business-driven aspects of a holistic enterprise architecture comes with it. And the nice thing, of course, also is the 60% off special. That, of course, has invigorated a lot of people to take advantage of it right now so that they can get these specialized classes that we have, for example, like tonight for the students, but at the same time, take advantage of, if they want to get a little bit more technical, taking care of the cloud aspects of architecture as well. But for everybody, that's the last question we're going to take for today. Join us tomorrow for the 1 p.m. Webinar on how to get your first cloud architect job. If you do have questions about other things such as enterprise architecture or so forth, we'll try our very best to address them. But aside from that, I wish you all a very good day, morning, evening, wherever you might be at. We definitely look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And if not, we'll definitely see you next week again. We have a wonderful schedule for everybody set that hope everybody will take advantage of and be excited. But aside from that, I wish everybody a good day, evening, and morning. Mike, any closing statements?
Yeah, I want to make sure you all do well. Before we leave, I'll answer that quick question on any tips. Here's the way I like to learn a technology. And here's the way, and here's the best success I can give you. I want you to learn how the technology works. Be able to say, what is the tech? Understand how the technology works and understand the benefits it can provide. And after I would do that, I would make sure that I could explain it to somebody that doesn't know technology. So if I have BGP, for example, the Border Gateway Protocol, which is a fairly complicated routing protocol, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to make sure I understood it well enough to translate it in Greek to speak to my mother-in-law, who's not from the tech background, and to be able to explain it to my wife, who practices internal medicine and cardiology for a living. So that was my test. Did I know it well enough that I could explain it to my wife and she could tell me about the BGP finite state machine, and she could tell me how BGP selects a path, and she could tell me why and how we use BGP. And when my wife could do it, I knew it well enough. And here's the thing. When you go on an interview, they're going to gauge how you describe it as how well you know about it. And if you can't explain it simply, that's why if you take anybody's certification course that's out there, not ours, because we know what the tech is, and what you hear is blah, 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 and you don't know what any of it means, it's because they didn't know it either, because they've never actually worked in the field. And that's why we do free certification training. I kind of hope that helps. The other thing that I would tell you is the way you train physicians. You see it, you do it, and you explain it to somebody else. So same kind of thing. You actually look at it, and then architects, our thing is to explain it. So you go do it, you explain it, maybe you video record yourself, you get it better, see what you learned, and then explain it to someone else. And then when they can explain it to you and you got it right, you know it. That's the way you typically train physicians and other people in very high performance positions. So I kind of hope that kind of helps.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's session. I know Mike and myself, we definitely enjoyed it very much. We look forward to the next one. For all those that are going to take some time out of your day tomorrow and join us for that, we definitely applaud you for doing so, being able to have the time, and we look forward to having that discussion. Aside from that, take advantage of the free resources that you'll find across the entire YouTube channel. Me and Mike are not very good at the lingo when it comes to YouTube, but I think it has something to do with, and let's see if we can get it right. I think it's like the video if you enjoyed the content, right?
Yep. Subscribe, and there's a bell. There's a bell. Hit the bell so that you get notified of new videos. See, Mark and I, we know architecture. We're trying to figure out YouTube. We're not YouTubers, but we love using YouTube to connect with people. Join us on that free webinar tomorrow. I think it'll give you some information that'll truly impact your life. And take advantage of the 60%, because right now, our course costs basically a single day's pay for the average architect for the program that it's in. And I don't think you can do better than that. But I love architecture careers. I'm infatuated with architecture careers. They're my life. Take care, everyone. And for any of my students that are here, boy, we're going to have fun in our enterprise architecture class at 6 o'clock tonight. Take care, everyone.